The confetti hadn't even settled when Nora felt the first twist of the blade. She was leaning against the water cooler in the Apex Dynamics break room, balancing a flimsy plastic cup of flat soda when the email blasted in. Bold subject line, "Firm secures landmark 15-million order contract. Kudos to our executive team and project spearhead Ben Harlow." Her grip tightened on the cup, crinkling the plastic just enough to draw a sidelong glance from an intern. For a heartbeat, she imagined hurling it across the room. Instead, she exhaled steadily and drifted toward the snack table like it was any ordinary Wednesday. Ben was already playing the role of triumphant visionary amid the junior staff, his hair slicked like a budget motivational guru, gesturing wildly as if he'd single-handedly reinvented supply chain logistics. "This is what agility looks like. Stay innovative. Stay ahead of the curve." Nora nursed her soda. Warm, syrupy, appropriate. He hadn't even been copied on the initial risk assessment drafts. Hell, he'd recycled her flowchart with the file name still reading Hayes Strategy V12 Final Use this one. Docs. And now there he was, beaming like he'd struck oil in his backyard. And hey, if you've reached this point and you've ever sat in a brainstorm where your concept mysteriously became Brad's breakthrough, or your data crunch showed up in someone else's report, do me a favor, smash that like button and subscribe. I swear it motivates the crew more than you realize. And believe me, you'll want to stick around for how this unfolds. Back in her inbox, the congrats were flooding in. Shout out to Ben. Stellar guidance. True innovator. The client even chimed in with a generic thanks for the flawless groundwork. Group effort, no specifics, just ambiguity. Safe, polished, calculated. She opened the project directory. It still carried her timestamps, her annotations, her literal all-nighters. 20 months of juggling prickly vendors, evasive auditors, and a VP who viewed every query like a personal affront. She'd nailed it. She'd reeled in the giant, and in the 11th hour, passed her rod to a man who thought due diligence was a motivational podcast. It wasn't merely the acclaim, it was the hush surrounding the pilfering, the way no one seemed shocked, the way IT pinged a thumbs-up emoji back to her just confirming roles email, the way Ben had nodded at her like they shared a secret pact. That was when Nora began packing. Not dramatically, not vengefully. Subtle, systematic motions, as she tucked her custom keyboard into a tote, unplugged her second monitor, cleared browser history. No one batted an eye, not until the entry-level coordinator, Riley, paused by with wide eyes and murmured, "You're not sticking around?" Nora grinned faintly. "Just tidying." Riley hesitated, then slipped a thumb drive onto the desk edge like it was illicit. I duplicated the early proposal iterations. "In case they scrub them," Nora raised a brow. "Why?" Riley shrugged. "You're the only one who ever got my pronouns right in memos." It was the sole farewell she received. By the time Ben delivered his conquest address in the atrium, Nora was out. No parting memo, no team's adieu, just a vacant screensaver and one-timed email set to dispatch at 4:58 p.m. to the client's audit squad. "As per your prior inquiry, awaiting directives on the risk mitigation rider. Regards, NH." She exited the premises sans ceremony, sans security tail, sans remorse. Only one notion reverberated in her mind. Credit where it's due, eh? We'll test that. The HR session reeked of lavender diffuser and institutional deflection. Nora perched in the taupe space opposite Carla, the HR specialist with the empathy span of a spreadsheet, while a mounted inspirational print behind her proclaimed synergy fuel success. A bitter irony considering the backdrop. Carla interlaced her fingers like she was relaying unfortunate news about a vending machine refund. "Couldn't locate records designating you as the project helm. Per our files, this was a joint endeavor." Nora held steady. "I crafted the strategy map. I managed every audit bulletin. I bargained 4 cycles of amendments with the client's audit crew while Ben was still figuring out rider clauses." Carla cocked her head like indulging a toddler. "Not denying your input, merely noting no lone individual held proprietorship. So the executive overviews from last quarter with my name atop them, those don't register." Carla emitted a vague hum between a sigh and a grin. "Those were preliminary sketches, and Ben has truly shown as a natural orator. He's an excellent representative for the organization." Nora fixed on her. "That's the benchmark now. Charm and charisma." Carla's grin leveled. "Nora, let's not turn this partisan was the line that ignited it. Not the obliteration, not the fabrications that, let's not turn this partisan, as if claiming truth was abruptly a rally slogan, as if voicing a theft equated to a meltdown on a podium. Nora drew air once via her nostrils, hushed, firm. If Carla spotted her fists balled beneath the table, she kept mum. The session concluded with a dossier of subsequent actions and a nudge to remain collaborative henceforth. Corporate lingo for stay mute and grin while we redistribute your labor to someone with superior networking flair. She retreated to her station with the deliberate stride of someone restraining a bellow. Her inbox brimmed with futile chain replies. Ben had circulated another gratitude note commending all for rising to the occasion. Nora was BCC'd forth from the end. That's when she commenced excavating. Nestled in her audit dossier, date-stamped 7 weeks earlier, was the message chain. She'd nearly overlooked it amid the frenzy of extended hours and perpetual overhauls. The client's principal auditor, Dana Voss, had responded straight to Nora's probes on Writer 8.3b, a nuance no one else had pinpointed. The closing sentence stated, "For ongoing audit and risk dialogue, kindly route all exchanges via Ms. Hayes solely. This will guarantee precision and persistence." Solely. Not collective. Not group-wide. Solely. She eyed the sentence like it was a lifeline cast into the abyss she'd been thrust into. Her pulse didn't surge. She didn't holler. Instead, another facet activated. The facet that invariably activated when Nora was cornered. Procedural analysis. Trend spotting. Frigid rationale clad in office attire. She correlated that message with the internal forwarding records. Indeed, 3 days on, Ben had dispatched an internal summary to execs recapping risk revisions, verbatim lifted from her prior outline. No attribution, no reference, just a pristine doc with his moniker in the margin. Demise by myriad doc saves. He wasn't merely hitching a ride. He was rewriting chronology live, and no one halted him because in the firm's view, he embodied triumph personified. Just sufficient allure, just sufficient jargon, just sufficient plausibility to render Nora appear obstinate if she vocalized. The harshest bit, she'd mentored him, not formally, but in those informal huddles, the ones personnel never logs. She'd guided him through the nuance between procedure review and liability revelation. Instructed him how to word items so audit wouldn't signal alarms. He absorbed it all, mastered the lexicon, and now he was deploying it to expunge her from the initiative she'd toiled for. She contemplated relaying the client's message to execs, just inserting it into the team's string with the emoji. But she refrained, not yet, because something profound had altered. This wasn't about reclaiming a bullet point in a bulletin anymore. This was about documentation, strategic documentation. Her ire didn't detonate, it stewed. She launched a blank cloud drive directory, dubbed it repository. Then she initiated uploading every amendment, every date-stamped outline, every revision control form with her credentials, every peripheral exchange, every endorsement memo. The complete structure of the accord, segment by segment with meta intact. She wasn't staging a spectacle. She was constructing a dossier. On Thursday dawn, Nora entered the premises toting naught but her fob and a thermal tumbler that still bore faint traces of the acrid tang of Tuesday. She didn't converse, didn't salute, just settled at her station and accessed her inbox like she was perusing a forecast prior to an interment. Ben was already commanding attention by the pane partition, chuckling overly boisterous, quaffing a almond milk cappuccino he'd likely charge under stakeholder rapport. Someone had fashioned glossy banners, Apex's grandest triumph yet, and affixed them to the lounge cooler. A platter of wilted pastries lingered untouched beneath. Glaze hardened like bargain varnish are reduced teams, and accessed the repository directory she'd formed. Over the preceding days, she'd erected a silent shrine of proofs. Accords marked in her script, messages from the client, Teams captures where she anticipated and rectified flaws before anyone detected. Session logs where she posed the tough queries while Ben affirmed like a dashboard figurine in the periphery. But she knew the mechanics. Proof wasn't authority unless you grasped when to deploy it. Today wasn't the day to contest. Today was the day to depart. She launched a fresh tab and lodged her abdication via the internal system. No theatrical epistle, no tearful ballad to the remarkable voyage, just a tick-marked miscellaneous, and a phrase that read effective forthwith. Then she shut the navigator, powered down her device, and commenced stowing. She didn't hasten. Every object, her tumbler, the snapshot of her brother's pups, the mini puzzle cube shaped like a gear neatly into a cardboard carrier. She proceeded like a medic sealing a wound. Exact, intentional, muted. No one detected. At 10:09 a.m., she launched a draft and composed one ultimate message to the client. As per your earlier solicitation, awaiting guidance on the risk mitigation rider. Regards NH. She tapped dispatch. Date stamp secured, traceable, enduring. Then she disconnected her display, wound the cable tidily, and rose. Hey, Nora, she pivoted. It was Riley, entry-level coordinator. 24 anxious. Always toted too many highlighters. I noticed you. Are you departing? Nora beamed subtly. Appears so. Riley gazed downward, then delved into their satchel and glided a thumb drive across the desk brim. I replicated the prototype files last month. Thought they might get purged when they shifted everything to Ben's repository. Nora arched a brow. You created duplicates? Riley shrugged. You're the only one who ever clarified how revision tracking truly functions. Figured it was the minimum I could do. Nora accepted the drive. It was one of those economical rubber ones with a faded emblem. Likely contained the sole unadulterated iteration of the strategy Ben had rebranded as his. Thank you, she uttered. Riley affirmed. You're like really adept at this. Nora didn't utter I know. She just positioned the USB in the carrier, affirmed once, and strode toward the lift. No send-off bash. No corridor ovation. No one capturing pics or patting her on the shoulder. Just a gradual, pristine departure that felt more like therapy than capitulation. By the time Ben sauntered by her station, the seat was vacant. He furrowed, surveyed around, then shrugged, and proceeded, too self-engrossed to ponder where the individual who'd erected his fragile edifice had vanished. Downstairs, Nora traversed past the lobby sans a syllable. The guard lifted a brow, but didn't impede her. Why would he? She resembled any other exhausted staffer snagging midday sustenance amid sessions. She wasn't returning. In the lot, she perched in her vehicle for an instant, permitting the quiet envelope her like haze. She could sense it. Not fury, not even melancholy. Just that uncanny, blade-sharp serenity that only arrives when there's naught left to forfeit. She withdrew her device, launched a fresh memo, titled it Autopsy AD. Then she cataloged everything they'd seized. Every line obliterated, every misallocation, every time she'd been instructed to grin while hemorrhaging. She concluded. She unlatched the dash and placed the memo inside adjacent the thumb drive Riley bestowed. Then she ignited the motor. Nora wasn't fleeing. She wasn't concealing. She was merely repositioning, because while they were occupied reveling their pilfered prize, they didn't comprehend the foundation beneath it was hers. And she just departed with the schematic. At first it was just quiet. Messages from the client's audit squad that once responded within hours now elongated to days. Schedule summons went unheeded. Weekly conferences were deferred, then subtly annulled. Apex Dynamics endeavored to feign all was well, like perhaps the client was merely occupied reveling in their own 15-minute radiance. But something about the hush felt amiss. Ben naturally dismissed it like lint on a jacket. We're just in the aftermath lull, he declared during the Wednesday recap, sipping fizzy mineral and employing terms like tactical interlude, like he'd ingested a lexicon soaked in vinaigrette. Major accords go mute before endorsements constantly. It's an assurance tactic. Carla, ever the devoted deputy, affirmed along. They're likely conducting internal validations. Occurs more frequently than not. But the reality was already wrapping. Muted, repetitive. By Friday, client's auditor had reverted an iteration of the pact, with a solitary adhesive tag affixed. Require elucidation on original risk dialogue sequence. That was the initial fissure. The tag didn't solicit paperwork. It didn't highlight a provision. It inquired about the sequence, the exchange chronicle, the traces. Carla narrowed at the display, lips compressed. What the heck does that signify? Ben appeared perplexed but masked it with a clear throat. Likely a layout matter. The subsequent morning, official plea arrived. Kindly have your appointed risk coordinator join the ultimate Q&A session as formerly concurred. Carla recited the message aloud in the exec chamber. Then, after an uneasy intermission, pivoted to Ben. That's you, correct? Ben's chuckle was tenuous. Certainly, yeah, obviously. So, they appended him to the schedule summons, granted him entry to the risk repository, and instructed him to merely maintain it overview level. He affirmed assuredly oblivious. The session was a gradual demolition. 4 minutes in, the client's associate auditor queried, Can you verify the safeguard measures detailed in the August amendment of 8.3b? Ben fluttered. I trust those were conventional. Conventional how? The client probed. You know, like conventional sector norms. A hiatus. Which sector? Ben solidified. You could nearly hear the pains fracturing in his psyche as he hunted for a salvation that wasn't present. Someone cleared in the backdrop. Someone else silenced to chuckle. The client's principal auditor, Dana Voss, inclined nearer to the lens. Was this provision penned by you? Ben moistened his lips. It was a group collaboration. The call terminated 7 minutes subsequently. The following day, Apex Ops Director discreetly messaged the legal division soliciting an update on endorsement. The response was glacial. Presently, we are examining discrepancies in staff allocation prior to advancing. We'll connect. Oh, endorsement. No transfer, just institutional limbo. And then came the exec session. Convened in the grand chamber with the varnished board no one ever contacted unless they possessed equity or silver locks. Ben was there donning a cravat that appeared leased, visibly perspiring through his Oxford. Carla perched rigidly beside him, leafing through a bundle she didn't comprehend. About midway through the session, a platinum-mained exec member named Thornton only vocalized when something reeked of litigation, set his specs down, and queried the chamber. Why is our risk coordinator not here? The chamber congealed. Carla cleared her vocal cords. Ben has been directing risk synchronization. Thornton cocked his head. That wasn't my inquiry. Quiet. He surveyed the visages around the board, then rapped the heap of documents before him. I've got a score of exchange records here. All of them display someone named Hayes as the contact point. Nora Hayes. Ben sat back, fluttering hard. Carla resembled she desired to liquefy into the flooring. Where is she? Thornton queried. She departed, Carla uttered. Ultimately. Last week. Thornton affirmed once gradually. So, the individual the client relied on, the one managing risk from inception, departed. And we didn't alert the client. We didn't hand over. We didn't even inform them. The quiet wasn't merely uneasy now. It was hazardous. I think they were notified. Ben attempted. I dispatched a message. Do you possess a log of that? It may have been oral. Thornton didn't elevate his tone. He didn't require to. His immobility was a menace all its own. This accord is dangling by a filament, and the filament is unraveling because someone botched fundamental succession. If we forfeit this pact, it won't be due to the client. It'll be because we couldn't maintain our narrative consistent. The chamber was muted for an extended period. Afterward, behind sealed panels, someone endeavored to attribute the fault to the client's evolving demands. Someone else uttered it was likely audit being excessively vigilant, but all knew what was transpiring. Apex had forfeited command of the tale, and somewhere out there, the one individual who could remedy it was absent. Worse, no one had deemed to inquire why she'd departed. They were too occupied reveling, too occupied pilfering a claim, too haughty to perceive the snare they were striding into, how they were in it, and the partitions were beginning to murmur her name. Nora's den didn't resemble the command hub of an institutional collapse. It resembled a decor mag with a Java fixation, wick flickering dim on the ledge, greenery sagging just sufficient to appear poignant. A dog-molded tumbler half brimming with tepid peppermint lingered untasted by her device. But on the monitor, electronic pitfalls were being constructed with operative exactness. She didn't fury input. She didn't soliloquize to the pup. She proceeded with the systematic serenity of someone who devoted her mature existence, converting disarray into stakeholder-facing outputs. Each directory she accessed was another conduit, messages, outlines, chronologies, and every file bore her imprints. She commenced with the initial trace, the message from April. Subject line 8.3b risk edits for vetting. Appended was a marked iteration of the strategy with her credentials in the notes, a pristine ultimate iteration with her moniker and endorsement in the margin. Not Ben's, not Carla's, hers. Writer 8.3b had been Nora's notion, a gentle but obligatory key individual writer interred deep in the risk architecture. It didn't clamor for notice. It merely declared that appointed risk coordinator would be deemed substantial to accord fulfillment unless formally substituted and recognized by both entities. Evident English. Extract Nora from the accord sans informing the client, and you activate a risk violation. And they had extracted her sans alert, sans substitute, sans a damn notion. She appended it to the directory. Next came the chain from Dana Voss, the client's audit hound. A score of exchanges owned curt but deferential. Dana had evidently favored Nora's approach. She'd even articulated as much in one response, value your precision invigorating after our prior supplier. That wasn't merely commendation. That was inclination legally logged. She persisted, compiling date stamps of outline submissions. tracked altered iterations displaying Nora affecting the pivotal risk updates, even Teams exports where Ben had remarked, "Let's just adopt Nora's phrasing here. It's sharper." One acquired its own minor emphasis. Then came the internal schedule summons she'd dispatched for the August risk walkthrough. She'd composed this will assure we're secured before client vetting. Let's maintain this concise. The session had been joined by 4 individuals, Nora, the ops director, and notably no Ben. She bundled it all into a compressed file dubbed Elucidation Bundle NHV1, and then she reclined. It wasn't about payback. It was about archiving, composed the message gradually, reciting each term aloud before advancing. There was no majestic disclosure, no veiled aggressive pitfalls, just lucidity to DVOS Advantage AuditCom Subject Elucidation Bundle. Apex Engagement. Dear Dana, I hope this reaches you in good spirits for your squad's recent probes concerning staff allocation. I've assembled pertinent materials that may aid in elucidating risk-related exchanges and authorship. Please locate appended finalized iteration of 8.3 BW annotated chronicle message chains pertaining to risk proprietorship chronology of strategy outlines and endorsements. Let me know if you need anything additional. Best regards, Nora Hayes. She perused it thrice. No sentiment, no flourish, just accuracy. Then she tapped dispatch. It was 11:39 p.m. on a Saturday. Ideal timing. By Monday dawn, Audit Squad would have had opportunity to peruse everything meticulously, thoroughly, and sans Apex spin apparatus looming over their shoulders. The contest had altered. It was no longer about internal machinations or pilfered acclaim. It was about record maintenance, procedural record maintenance. She decanted herself a flute of white wine, inadvertently finished the tepid tea, winced, strolled to the pane. Outside, the metropolis twinkled like naught had transpired. Inside, a explosive had just been linked to the Verity. They wouldn't detect it approaching, but it was approaching nonetheless. It commenced with a message. Just one sentence. Courteous and lethal. We are officially soliciting juridical elucidation concerning potential key individual misrepresentation in the Apex Accord. No punctuation bursts, no menaces. Just those terms deposited into the inboxes of Apex's legal aid, like a tossed ignited match in a chamber brimming with vapors. By 9:08 a.m., Carla had summoned a Code Amber exec cluster. By 9:11 a.m., the ops director canceled his tea time and was midway to the premises. By 9:25 a.m., Apex's in-house legal squad was scouring every iteration of the pact, attempting to grasp what the heck key individual misrepresentation even signified, because no one could recall anyone consenting to a key individual rider initially. But Nora had recalled, and she documented everything. Carla's tone fractured during the conference with external counsel. We don't even employ key individual dependencies. We evade them. It must be a misexchange. The external counsel wasn't purchasing it. Well, someone exchanged it very lucidly. The client dispatched us the endorsed iteration. Incorporates Writer 8.3b. Personnel dependency on one Nora Hayes. You acquainted? Carla resembled she'd been struck. She resigned. She didn't even inform us she did. The attorney interrupted. She replicated legal on her departure date stamp. Said she'd await further directives on the risk mitigation rider. Quiet. Then why didn't anyone notify the client she'd departed? Ben vocalized, sounding like a figure explaining a collision while still clutching the fob. I thought I'd referenced it was during the internal handover. I mean, we presumed you presumed what, Mr. Harlow? Ben wriggled that it was comprehended. She was just, support level. I advanced into helm. The attorney's tone went glacial. Based on whose sanction Carla sanctioned it. Carla fluttered, appalled. I instructed you to incorporate her, not supplant her. But she departed because you appropriated a claim for her labor. The chamber whirled. What had once been meticulous institutional orchestration, grins, grips, sanitized. Bulletins had degenerated into fault evasion. They attempted to contact the client voicemail. They attempted anew out of premises. Then came the second strike. A electronic summons for the internal message logs involving all risk documentation from March through September. Every iteration, every amendment, every CC, every team string, the legal squad solidified. They were standing on juridical quicksand. The more they stirred, the deeper they descended. That afternoon, Ben was hauled into a strategy chamber with 4 veteran associates and a heap of printouts that resembled more like an accusation than an initiative critique. He kept faltering through the same nebulous defense. It was joint. She wasn't forceful. She never overtly said she didn't need to say anything. One of the associates cut in. You duplicated her labor. You relayed her amendments. You presented her map unaltered, I might append. And you positioned your moniker in the margin. Ben attempted to grin, convulsed, grotesque. We're all part of the same squad. Cease uttering that, the ops director snapped. If we were a squad, we wouldn't be in juridical inferno because of your conceit. Carla attempted to redirect. Let's just contact Nora. Elucidate the miscomprehension. No, came the frigid voice of Thornton from the board's end. You don't contact the individual whose endorsement is on a risk rider you violated. She already did contact the client. That's why we're perched here gazing at a potential deceit claim. The term deceit lingered in the air like a garrote. Someone murmured about appearances. Someone else murmured about harm mitigation. But nobody possessed a scheme because they didn't know the full extent yet. All they knew was that their golden accord was suddenly volatile, and every message chain they disregarded was now Exhibit A in a case they couldn't manipulate. That evening, Apex's PR squad issued a bland, vacant declaration to the client. We are devoted to openness and anticipate resolving any lingering confusion. The client didn't retort. Instead, the firm received notice of a preliminary session timetabled for the ensuing week. Internal spirit hit another? Staff commenced murmuring. Risk associates began retrieving old directories and quietly reviewing their own inboxes. One entry-level texted their pal, I think we're screwed. Another queried if they should commence refreshing their CVs. But Ben strolled around like the illumination was still on. Like if he grinned broad enough, the partitions wouldn't crumble. He was still branding it a procedural snag. Carla knew better. So did Thornton, because there's no such thing as a snag when the courtroom's already reserved. And in that quiet between frenzy and juridical paperwork, the name they were all too frightened to utter aloud floated in everyone's mind. Hayes' specter they attempted to enter had just become their arbiter. The courtroom reeked of chillstone and aged strain, the variety of locale where reputations didn't just perish. They were dissected live. Rows of somber attire filled the spectators. Apex's legal squad on the left, the client's attorneys on the right. Media aides dotted the rear row, inputting silently at their devices. The atmosphere was still methodical. No one elevated their tone. No one grinned. This wasn't drama. This was hemorrhage with typefaces and displays. Carla perched rigidly beside Thornton, her mandible clenched so firmly it appeared welded. Ben fidgeted like a youth compelled to endure his own judgment, still fiddling his cravat even though no one had glanced at him since they entered. Apex's general counsel, bleary and hyperstimulated, murmured 11th-hour notes no one would peruse. At 9:07 a.m., the portals at the courtroom's rear groaned open. Nora strode in, no pomp. No fanfare, just a gentle snap of her heels as she traversed the rear aisle, compact device bag slung over one shoulder, her navy coat still moist from the dawn mist. She didn't establish eye contact with anyone. She didn't need to. No one detected her yet. She glided into the furthest seat in the ultimate row, unlatched her bag, withdrew a compact pad and a stylus, reclined. The magistrate, a gentleman with gray temples and no patience for anything less than exactness, convened the session. Let the record indicate preliminary elucidation hearing for Vantage Holdings versus Apex Dynamics case number. Nora didn't need to hear the remainder. She already knew every term that would ensue. The client's principal attorney, Dana Voss, rose with the serenity of a lady clutching a trigger she'd committed to memory and repose. We're here to elucidate a matter of misrepresentation. She commenced tone-gauged but keen. Specifically, identity and role of the individual listed in Rider 8.3b, which per the endorsed iteration was a binding key individual dependency tied to risk continuity. Apex's lawyer rose. Your Honor, we believe this to be an administrative misinterpretation. The rider was inherited from a prior outline. At no juncture was there intent to designate any staffer as a vital dependency. Dana grinned courteously. I trust you won't mind if we review the message chain that outlines the rider's origin. She delved into her portfolio and extracted a heap of printed messages, fresh, indexed, hue-coded. This chain begins on April 15th, she persisted. From Nora Hayes, Apex's then lead risk coordinator, to myself and 2 members of our audit squad. It contains amendments, commentary, and suggested phrasing, most of which was implemented sans revision. She paused, flipped to a marked page, and recited aloud. To preserve integrity and avert any confusion during fulfillment, designated coordinator will serve as an internal safeguard. Given the tailored nature of the risk framework, this rider will act as a procedural failsafe. She glanced up. That's Miss Hayes speaking in her capacity as Apex's risk lead. On record, in writing, Carla went ashen. The lawyer flipped another page. May 9 follow-up from our side. We concurred. Endorsed. June 4th, Miss Hayes sends ultimate outline for endorsement. June 6th, Apex counters. July 2nd, Miss Hayes sends updated fulfillment protocol. She looked at the magistrate. Her name is on every single page. Apex's lawyer cleared. With respect. This doesn't alter the fact that she's no longer with the firm, which the client was never informed. Dana shot back till 3 days after her formal abdication, and only after repeated delays in the finalization process. Nora observed from the rear, expression inscrutable. Her stylist didn't stir. Her hands didn't quiver. If anyone examined closely, they might have seen the corners of her mouth twitch upward. Not a sneer, just a cognizant serenity. Apex's side began to shuffle documents. Ben leaned over to murmur something to Carla, who brushed his arm away, sans looking. Magistrate called for quiet. Thornton was visibly perspiring now, his pale-collared shirt abruptly 2 tones darker at the rear. He inclined forward, murmuring fiercely to Apex's counsel, who affirmed, then pivoted back toward the bench. Your Honor, if I may, this is still at its core a misunderstanding. Miss Hayes was never formally named in any internal summary as a critical dependency. Dana didn't even flutter. That's not the criterion. Dealing with endorsed client-facing documentation. She was our contact point. She was designated in writing. He removed her sans notice and continued fulfilling as if naught had altered. That's not a misunderstanding. That's misrepresentation. The magistrate held up a hand. I'll be the one to determine that. He turned toward Apex's table. Where is Miss Hayes now? Dead quiet. Carla opened her mouth, then sealed it. Ben looked like he wanted to vanish. From the rear of the chamber, Nora finally elevated her head. She was still unperturbed, waiting. Excuse me, the magistrate uttered mid-phrase, his tone slicing through the sterile air like a blade. He raised a hand and pivoted toward the client's table. Before we advance, one elucidation. Dana paused and affirmed, Yes, Your Honor. The magistrate adjusted his specs and looked down at the printed message chain he'd been emphasizing live. This Nora Hayes, individual named across every risk thread, the one who penned the key writer in dispute, and the one whose departure was never disclosed to the client, or this court is in this chamber, and was not disclosed by the defense. No one stirred. Carla looked like her essence had been hermetically sealed. Ben was sinking in posture, in presence, in everything. The chamber wasn't Apex's anymore. It belonged to the lady in the rear row, one they had obliterated like she was just another entry in a fiscal report, the one they'd never anticipated to appear, let alone rise. The magistrate removed his specs, set them on the bench, then inclined forward, lacing his fingers. This alters everything. The quiet before the plunge was clinical, chilly, the variety of stillness that precedes a ruling, not just in court, but in people's existences. The magistrate reclined in his seat and let the burden of the chamber settle. He uttered it clear, sharp, conclusive. This court finds that Apex Dynamics knowingly failed to disclose a material personnel change relevant to the fulfillment of Reader 8.3b, given the nature of the rider, and the signed documentation supporting the plaintiff's reliance on Miss Hayes' involvement. The contract is deemed invalid due to fraud by omission. The terms landed like a gut strike. Apex's general counsel perched motionless, mandible secured. Carla's eyes darted to Ben like he might evaporate into vapor. He looked like he was attempting to mentally reverse the last 7 months and expunge himself from every iteration of every error. Thornton sealed his leather dossier with finality and let it reside untouched on the board. Across the aisle, the client's squad didn't exult. They didn't need to. The triumph was in the record now, and the repercussions would be savage. Dana Voss rose and addressed the court, cool as alloy. Your Honor, reserve the right to pursue damages stemming from this misrepresentation. Intentional or otherwise, the omission materially impacted fulfillment timelines, cost structures, and stakeholder confidence. We'll be filing within the week. The magistrate affirmed, noted for the record. Then he pivoted back to Apex's table. You may request a recess to confer with counsel. Apex's lead attorney looked like he was ingesting venom. Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to request recess. Permission granted, and then visibly, quietly, Apex began to unravel at the seams. Half the exec members rose and departed the spectators sans a syllable, devices already humming. Harm mitigation mode engaged. An aide trailed behind them, murmuring about a media briefing. Juridical press hazard and an equity holder crisis call. Ben remained perched, dazed. His visage had gone from flushed to ashen. His digits gripped the board's brim like a figure clinging to a threshold in a gale, still hoping the partitions wouldn't blast off. Carla turned to him, murmured something, but he didn't stir. His gaze was locked on the flooring, perceiving naught. Behind them, Nora rose gradually. No illumination tracked her. No ovation, but every head still pivoted as she strode forward, past the apex board, past the firm that had eviscerated her and repackaged her acumen with someone else's moniker. She wasn't here to desecrate the debris. She was here to abandon it. As she reached the courtroom portals, she felt a hand delicately touch her elbow. Dana, the client's principal attorney, inclined in, tone low. "Our squad would still like to collaborate with you," she uttered with absolute serenity. "Just not through them," Nora fluttered once, then affirmed. Not a victorious affirm. Not a told-you-so affirm. Just recognition, just lucidity. Outside the courtroom, the metropolis proceeded like naught had transpired. But inside Apex's corner suites, glass would fracture, seats would be vacated, names would be obliterated this time for good. And Nora? She strode out into the breeze, coat fastened, bag slung over her shoulder, a slight squint in her eye from the dawn sun. She didn't glance back because some triumphs don't come with ovation or payback fantasies. Some come with a simple verity they couldn't supplant her. And now everyone knew it. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate comeback, hit that subscribe button on my channel for more stories like this. Underdogs turning the tables with smarts and strategy. Don't forget to like and share. It keeps the content coming.